Good afternoon, everybody. We're just going to give it just a couple minutes to allow for some folks to make their way in. Good afternoon, everybody. We're just going to still give everybody just a little bit of time to make their way in, but I'm just going to go ahead and get started so that we'll make sure we're mindful of everyone's time today. So welcome to our Leaders of the Pack Speaker Series. My name is Anna Valegia. I am the Director of Career Services for the NC State Alumni Association. So we are excited to have an incredible lineup of speakers and are so thankful that all of you have decided to spend the next hour with us. So I just want to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started. So everyone is on mute and your video functionality has been turned off. This session is being recorded and will be available by email to all registrants by close of business tomorrow. If you have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A feature. We had several questions, really great questions, come through the registration form, so we were trying to answer as many as possible. So I want to just quickly go over the layout of the event. So we have asked each of our distinguished alumni speakers to answer the following three questions. So question number one, how did you enter the workforce and migrate to where you are now? So we will hear from each speaker individually for this question. Then we will go to question number two, what three factors have led to your success? And finally, question number three, what advice would you give yourself when you were first starting in your career, knowing what you know now? So questions number 2 and 3 will be answered as a panel discussion, and then we'll open it up to further questions. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our distinguished alumni speakers. I'm actually going to let each speaker introduce themselves as they answer the first question of the day. So we are going to invite Kark Collins to come on with me. And we are going to kick off with the first question. So the first question for you, Kark, let me get your video going. So the first question is, how did you enter the workforce and migrate to where you are now? So I'm going to let you take the floor. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Anna. Hi, everyone. I'm Kark Collins, class of '89 industrial engineering. I met my wife in Metcalf dorm at State, and we'll celebrate 30 years of marriage this February. We have 2 sons, a freshman at Arizona State University and a 10th grader at Argyle High School in Charlotte. And I spent 8 years on the Alumni Association board. Just some history. So I grew up in a Wolfpack family. My father is on the faculty since the late 1960s. And at age 90, he's still actively in the College of Ag and Life Science, doing development work, leadership programs, and whatnot. He's a world traveler, which gave me the bug. I have 40 countries under my belt, and I think I'm about to pass him in that respect. I was in Reynolds Coliseum during the 1974 and 1983 NCAA championship runs, so grew up going to those games. One of my early kind of work experiences was working in the tobacco fields with my father. Saturdays, hot summer, Eastern North Carolina, doing chemical experiments where I would measure out chemicals and he would apply them, and then we would come back week after week and record what had transpired with the experiment. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I graduated college. I had co-opted and knew that working in a factory was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I joined Anderson Consulting which later became Arthur Andersen. And I effectively had a 2-year plan where I would do that for 2 years and figure out what I wanted to do. Well, that 2-year plan lasted 31 years. I started doing consulting work. It was really a great adventure. I worked on different projects, different countries, loved to improve processes. And I found many different roles along the way. Typically, they just kind of fell into my lap. I got lucky in that respect. In terms of, I did IT consulting, working at power companies and healthcare providers, telecom, banks. And then I spent a year in finance. I did 4 or 5 years in facilities management. I worked in HR, and then ended up in 2001 in procurement. So be careful what you complain about. I was gotten pretty vocal about our procurement processes and tools. And the culture at the company at that time was certainly around, if you complain about something, you have to be willing to get involved and help. So that started almost 20 years in procurement. I once heard the secret of building a successful career is 2 by 2 by 2. So 2 roles, 2 lines of business, and 2 geographies. So getting that experience and that diversity, and I certainly got that 2 by 2 by 2 experience. I'll share 2 career highlights with you. I built and ran one of the largest contingent staffing programs in the world. When I handed that over some years back, I had 100,000 unique contractors a year and about $2 billion worth of spend that was going through the program. And then secondly, I ran sourcing, purchasing, and payables for 60 countries, 1,000 team members in 35 countries, and about $15 billion a year in accounts payable expenditure I was managing. I left in January of this year. It was a great ride, no real regrets, but I was really, at that point, just kind of burned out of, dealing with so many countries and time zones and whatnot. Also, I had 2 people that were my age, next door neighbor, and then another friend that passed away suddenly of heart attacks. And so it just kind of makes you realize that life's short, and you look for, maybe a way to transition and to give back. I moved to Habitat for Humanity, the Charlotte region. The focus is on serving others rather than a profit motive. And the vision for Habitat, if you're not familiar, is everyone deserves a decent, affordable place to live. For me, it was an opportunity to do something locally. I'd worked from home for 18 years. Now I'm actually coming into an office most days of the week. Our entire organization for Habitat Charlotte region is 170 people versus the over 500,000 that I left in our prior company. Habitat seems simple. Yeah, we build houses for low income people, but it is very complex. And Habitat Charlotte region is in the top 3 to 5 of the 1,100 Habitat affiliates in the US. So we'll build 50 homes this year. We'll recycle or flip 20 homes. We'll do 150 critical home repairs. So think of it as elderly or disabled or fixed income people that we come and help modify their house so that they can age in place. We service 1,100 mortgages. And we have 7 stores that do about $10 million in revenue, most of which is donated by people like you, where you have furniture or ceiling fans or kitchen cabinets or something that you donate. And then we're able to sell that and put that back into our houses. My role as VP of operations is to drive the infrastructure to enable that vision and allow us to deliver. So I have HR, IT, facilities, fleet, insurance, project management, and a host of other things. I'm still learning and growing. I've done some stuff I'm doing some stuff now that I've never done before. Insurance would be one of those. Really, feel like I'm trying to make an impact on Habitat's ability to deliver the housing. And I'm still leveraging a lot of my prior skills around the HR, facilities, and finance and whatnot of things I've done in my career. Thank you. Pleasure to be here today.
Thank you so much, Kark. That was fascinating. And 40 countries is very impressive. So that's amazing. So thank you so much for sharing. So now we will hear from Dr. Pamela Senegal. So I'm going to, oh, there she is. Welcome, Pamela, take it over.
All right, thank you. Kark, I only have 29 countries under my belt, but eventually I want to get to 40 and be like you when I grow up. I'm Dr. Pamela Senegal. I'm president of Piedmont Community College. I'm actually a graduate. I'm class of '89. And then I came back and got my master's and then came back again and picked up my doctorate in adult and community college education. So along the way during that time, and even before that, my father was in the Army. And so as a result, we moved every couple of years as a family. And so that's where we had a chance to live abroad. But I was actually born at a base in Alabama. Eventually, my family, once my dad got out of the military, we relocated to Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm actually a 1989 graduate of West Charlotte. And along the way since then, I have 3 sons, and one of my sons is actually a graduate of Hampton University, and he's now a news producer in Atlanta. My middle son is a graduate of Winston-Salem State University and is an IT professional in Charlotte. And my youngest son, down to the last one, is a 9th grader in our early college program. And so personally, in addition to the work that I do at the college, I'm also involved in my sorority, which is Delta Sigma Theta sorority. I'm involved in the Alumni chapter here in Roxborough, North Carolina, also involved with my church as part of the usher ministry and as part of the scouting ministry. And then I also do some work statewide with diversity and equity initiatives and also on technology issues statewide for the community college system. So that's just a little bit about myself at a high level, but what I want to do is spend a little bit of time just talking about some of the high points of how I sort of migrated to the role that I'm in now. And so for me, the thing that was the most important, that's the thread throughout my career to getting to where I am today, is really the importance of internships. And so even in high school, internships helped me figure out not only what I wanted to do, but also what I did not want to do. And so I remember having my first unpaid internship where I got a chance to do marketing, customer service, facility services, research and development. And I got to do all that at my family's laundromat. So off of Clanton Road in Charlotte, my family had a laundromat that had a dry cleaning service and a wash and fold service. And so as part of marketing, my older sister and I got a chance to do everything from using stencils and walking the neighborhoods to paper the neighborhood to let them know about our family laundromat. Customer service, we got to make change, resolve issues, and fix minor issues along with facility services. So I can still tell you if a dryer makes a certain noise, I can probably tell you what's going on with it. But we also got to do research and development, and that was how we had a family discussion and decided to add some services. And then my sister and I had the joy of actually implementing that wash and fold service. So that was my very first internship that taught me a lot about entrepreneurship, but it also taught me how important it was for me to continue my education so that I have some other opportunities. And along the way, I had a chance to intern at Discovery Place Science Museum, and from there, I learned that I really enjoyed explaining things to people and teaching. I love seeing people's eyes light up once I explained the scientific concept behind how a certain exhibit worked. And so that was the great thing about that opportunity. And then I had a chance to work at WBTV, the CBS affiliate, as the on-air high school reporter. And from there, I learned that I loved telling people stories. I loved hearing about people's stories, but I didn't really like being the front person or being the face of those stories. And so then I went on to NC State after graduating from West Charlotte, really with the intention always of becoming an attorney. That was my dream all the way through undergraduate. And then I had the opportunity to do an internship and really spend time with a number of attorneys. And that was thanks to Dean Hawkins and the Fellows Program. They were able to help me make some connections there. And what I learned is that I really could not see myself becoming an attorney based on the things that I learned about what was important in those things. But along the way, I also had a chance to intern at the General Assembly when Dan Blue was Speaker. And that really helped me understand how laws are put together. It gave me an appreciation for the importance of statutes and zoning on how communities are developed, and just gave me some really important foundations for some of the work that I get to do today. From there, when I graduated as an undergraduate, I took a job with NC State actually as a traveling admissions counselor, and had a chance to represent NC State and to create this pipeline into higher education for just a real broad bandwidth of communities and citizens, and found that I really enjoyed helping people make that connection. And then I got a call from a faculty member at NC State who offered me the chance to go back and get my master's without any additional debt. And so from there, I was able to come back to NC State another time and pick up my master's in public administration. And as a result of that, I ended up working for Anderson Consulting. And so that's kind of my connection to Kark. did that for a couple of years. And from there, really discovered a love of training and development and delivery of training. And only stayed at Anderson for a couple of years. But from there, got a chance to go and be a training development manager at an IT company and really just hit my stride. Found that I loved bringing things together, helping people understand how to better use their systems, how to develop and grow in terms of their soft skills. I was just absolutely hooked on it. And then unfortunately for me, the company was bought by another company. And then I had the unfortunate experience of watching everyone who hired me be laid off. And eventually I was one of those people who was also laid off. But the good news from that is that I found my passion. I found the thing that I cared about the absolute most. And from there, I was able to find a job at the local community college. And that's where I fell in love almost 22 years ago. I was absolutely smitten with this purpose of higher community uplift along with learning and development and really just transforming communities. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 22 years is I've been at a number of successive positions within the community college, everything from director of computer training to economic development roles, to my current role now in Roxborough, North Carolina, where we serve 2 counties and we serve about 6,000 students a year, but we have a bigger regional impact because of our willingness to lean in and really be part of our community. So those are sort of the steps or the big pieces that have taken me to my current career path. And I appreciate you all listening and allowing me this opportunity to share my migration path to my current role. Look forward to the additional questions.
Thank you so much, Pamela. I wrote down transforming communities because I thought that was extremely powerful. So I love that. Thank you for sharing. All right. Last but certainly not least is Brad Davis. So Brad, all right, welcome. Take it away.
Thank you, Anna. I really appreciate it. And I can't claim that I've been to a bunch of different countries, but I could say I've probably eaten food from like 40 or 50 countries. So let's count that. I'm just really humbled and excited to be with you guys today, and certainly have great respect for Pamela and Kark. So it's awesome. I'm from Raleigh. I never really left the area except for a little bit of time after NC State. I've got 3 children. My wife and I have been married over 20 years. My kids are in high school and college. I've actually got a sophomore at State right now, which is really fulfilling for me. And so my connections to NC State continue to deepen. I've also had the privilege and I'm humbled to have been part of the Park Scholars Program through the advisory council there or committee there, and continue to help with some of the committee work, which is so exciting. What an incredible program. So I would say the theme for me of my sort of journey, and I'll start from NC State, but my theme would be sort of what goes around comes around, or in your beginnings, you often find your ends. And I'm not saying I'm at my end, but what goes around comes around. So when I was at NC State, I had a wonderful experience, wonderful education, but I worked 3 part-time jobs, and I worked at a restaurant. I worked at the YMCA on Hillsborough Street as a youth counselor. I worked at a summer camp during the summers and enjoyed those experiences and loved them. When I finished at State, I was not fully formed, and I didn't have a real clear concept of what I wanted to be when I grew up. I did have some puzzle pieces together, I would say, or on the table at least. They weren't fully put together. So after NC State, I took advantage of an exchange program, and I actually lived in London, England for some time. And I worked and lived in a little Irish pub in a very tough part of London, not the tourist district for sure, but absolutely loved it. And went there by myself, so it was a little tough. Didn't make a whole lot of money, but what I did get to do was experience a different culture. And if you've ever been to London or other big metropolitan areas, it's multicultural, international. And so just being exposed to the world that way was real formative for me. And I really recommend, if you've not spent time doing that, If you have the ability to do it, please, I would encourage you to. But during that time, I worked really hard, loved the family that owned the little pub I worked at, but I had some time to think, had some time to process life a little bit. And I sort of, at that point, formed what I would call my mission focus, not a statement or anything like that, but I really determined, life's too short to spend it doing something you don't love. And so I really thought about, what do I love and what is important to me? And I really came on 4 things. Number 1, I want to help people. I want to help people grow. I want to help people who are suffering. And I want to make the world a better place. I want to leave a legacy and leave a mark. And so with that in mind, I came back to the States, and I reached back to my experience at NC State and connected with the summer camp I'd worked at. And I actually worked full time there for several years. And loved it, and affirmed that the mission I'd sort of established was correct. And the fulfilling work there really established for me that I was on the right path. I didn't make a whole lot of money, but had wonderful experiences, wonderful relationships. Also working in a small business, I really affirmed for myself work ethic and the tremendous amount of blood, sweat, and tears that are necessary to make any business work, but especially a small business. So during that time, I met my wife to be, we got engaged, we moved back to Raleigh. I reached back to my time at NC State and my network there, and secured full-time employment at the YMCA, where I had worked part-time. And I was a youth director and ran summer programs and after-school programs and played dodgeball for a living, which is pretty cool. And again, found that my mission that I'd sort of established was correct, and that it was such a great fit. And what an incredible organization. I ended up staying for 20 years, and I served in a variety of roles. And my highlight would be, I was humbled to be the branch executive director of the Alexander Y on Hillsborough Street, the very Y that I'd grown up at. And actually knocked the old building down that had been there since the 50s, and we raised the money to build a new one, and that stands there today. And that is where I discovered my true love, and that is philanthropy. And some people think philanthropy is fundraising. Fundraising is when you have a problem or an opportunity and it costs something to deal with, so you raise the money to pay for it. And you might sell donuts, you might do a car wash, you might charge dues, you might ask everyone to give a certain amount of money. And oftentimes fundraising can be a bit transactional and impersonal. We all do it. It has its place for sure. Philanthropy is the higher calling. And philanthropy is when we reach out to folks with resources or folks with a passion and connect them to an opportunity to fulfill their passion. So a donor who wants to help serve folks and provide opportunities for people. So philanthropy is when 1 + 1 = 3. I call it the magic of philanthropy. So the donor giving the resources is fulfilled. The folks being served or experiencing the opportunity created are fulfilled. And then the organization that made that happen is fulfilled. The staff and volunteers and the mission of that organization. So philanthropy is a beautiful thing. And for me, it's my life work. And once that realization came to me, I really started looking to opportunities that would allow me to do that all the time. And that would be my focus. So again, my network came to bear. And the restaurant I worked at in NC State, there was a gentleman that came in every Sunday because his wife told him it was his time to provide food for the family. So he would order the same order every Sunday, and I would meet him and hook him up, and we became friends. And to this day, he's an important mentor to me and has really helped me shape who I am in my career. Well, he was the chair of the board of the Wake Med Foundation at that time, 6 years ago, when the opportunity presented itself. And long story short, after many conversations and in the hiring process, we all determined that this was a good fit. And I'm humbled to be in the current role here leading the WakeMed Foundation. We raise resources for WakeMed, the local community hospital. We're the largest healthcare provider in Wake County, largest private employer in Wake County. And the cool thing about WakeMed is we care for folks regardless of their ability to pay. We are the safety net, and there are so many remarkable stories. So I'm so honored to be able to help in that effort. And I said at the beginning, what goes around comes around, and in your beginnings, you find your ends. And so I'm humbled that here 30 years later, almost 30 years later, still fulfilling those four things that I shared as far as my mission focus goes. And the sky's the limit, and life moves forward. But thanks for giving me the opportunity to share, and I look forward to more questions. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing the difference between philanthropy and fundraising. I found that a very helpful perspective. So thank you so much. So I'm actually going to ask that all of you join me back on camera. Okay. All right, welcome back. So we're going to spend the rest of our time together. So thank you all so much for just telling us a little bit more about how you migrated to where you are. So question number 2 that I want to pitch to each of you are, what 3 factors led to your success? So Brad, since you're on a roll, I'm just going to kick it back to you.
Yeah, thanks. I would say nothing. This is that isn't one of my 3, but everything relies on hard work, right? And I think we all know that. But blood, sweat, and tears is luck gets you somewhere, but not all the time. I would say 3 things. Number 1, early on, like I shared in my narrative, I established a clear internal compass, or a North Star, that allows me, when I have opportunities, or when I'm clarifying my next steps, or when I'm dealing with times that aren't so clear, I can look back and see, okay, here's the 4 things that I'm about, and here are things that I'm not about. And so I can make decisions, and I can look back to that compass in that way. And that has helped me tremendously. The second thing I would say is, I've always tried to play to my strengths. So we're all not good at some things. We're all pretty good at many things. And then we all are probably very good at a few things. And so I've always tried to seek opportunities that played to those few things that I'm good at, and really good at. And I've also tried to build a team that helps me balance out the things that I'm not good at, and to be honest with myself about the differences there. The final thing I would say is, my network has continued to help me, and I mentioned that through my narrative. But your network is a living, breathing thing, and I would compare, this is a reach, but I would compare my network to a sourdough starter. And maybe you, like me, discovered sourdough bread making during the pandemic. But if you don't know, a starter, you have to feed it every day or it dies. And that's the network, my network. And I found that you have to feed it every day. And that's adding new people and learning something new about someone. But it's also giving back to your network, not just looking to it for opportunities for yourself, but seeking and finding ways to add values to others. So that'd be my top 3.
Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. So what about you, Pamela?
A lot of my factors are very similar to Brad's, having that overall framework. And for me, it's as simple as making sure that I have a clear personal mission. And then it makes it a lot easier to evaluate opportunities that come my way. And so for me, my personal mission, the thing that gets me up every morning, is that my whole focus is on transforming and uplifting communities through higher education. That's what I do. That is why I'm here. But in terms of my ability to do that work and do it successfully, there are 3 big things that have been important factors. And the first one is my willingness to invest in both formal and informal education. So whether it's internships, whether it is reading books, whether it is doing seminars, even in my role as president, this past year, I've been participating in an Aspen leadership program for an entire year, where I've had a chance to learn from best practices from community college presidents all over the country. And so my willingness to keep learning and growing in my role is really important. The second thing is that I've had a willingness to raise my hand and take on new assignments that that I wasn't necessarily fully prepared for, but I'm always willing to raise my hand and say, sure, I'll try that. And then trusting that the team that's around me and that with my own internal compass, that things will work themselves out for the best. And then I think the third thing is an ability to reflect and learn from all of the experiences that I've had, whether they're good or bad or somewhere in the middle. Really learning to take the time to consider, what did I gain from that experience and how can I use that as a building platform to do better and to even more deeply fulfill my personal mission. And so I think it's the process of those three things that have been really important to my overall success.
Thank you. I love this life mission. I think this is a great theme that I'm seeing. What about you, Kark?
So I really liked what Brad and Pamela had to say. I won't repeat those things because I certainly could put them in my top three as well. I'll take it in maybe a little bit more tactical view. So, find ways to take work off your boss and make their job easier. Come to your boss with solutions, not with problems. And be willing to take on, I think Pamela says, but be willing to take on the things that nobody else wants to do. Secondly, it's cliche, but it works, which is, under promise, over deliver. So set and manage expectations and follow through and honor your commitments and deliver, more than what you committed to. And lastly, I think is most important, which is to surround yourself with great people and find ways to empower them and to motivate them. Be appreciative, and if you do that, and you go to bat for your people, they'll run through brick walls for you. And I heard something today, which I really liked, which is instead of saying, "Hey, I appreciate that," or "I appreciate it," say, "I appreciate you," and it turns it a little bit differently to emphasize the appreciation of the person as opposed to the act. And so again, I heard that today. I'm going to try to embrace that. But anyway, take work off your boss, under promise, over deliver, and surround yourself with great people.
That's wonderful. Well, I appreciate you, all of you, for being here today. So thank you so much for that. All right. The final question that I have before we get to the Q&A part is, what advice would you give yourself when you were first starting in your career, knowing what you know now? So Kark, why don't you take that one first?
Sure. First, save. So, increase your savings every time you get a raise, max out that 401k, keep your lifestyle under your income instead of the other way around. And so you're managing the debt. I did this along the way, and it's just given me incredible freedom. It's how I could move out of a corporate job and move to a nonprofit and just never, really even think about it from a financial security standpoint. The second is around being intentional about maintaining friendships. So this is one I think I wish I did more, and I think it fits with that what Brad talked about in terms of the feeding that network. But I'm now going back and trying to restart friendships that I kind of let drift away, and so I regret that, and I'm actually trying to address that now that I have a little bit more time and can focus on some other things. And then third is support nonprofits with your time and treasure. So you can get a lot of satisfaction and self-worth out of helping others. It makes you appreciate how much you have. I mean, I had a former boss that would say, I used to complain about having no shoes until I met a man with no feet. And so it's like, how do you really appreciate what you have? And so often by serving others, you appreciate, how much you do have and how fortunate you are. And I think the happiest times I've had, and I think that maybe this is in Jimmy Carter's Good Times book or something, but it was around helping is when I was helping somebody else, and particularly if it was when I was helping someone else do something that they couldn't do for themselves.
Wow, that is really powerful. Thank you so much. Pamela, what about you?
So I would definitely build on what Kark has talked about, in particular around the importance of investing and cultivating those personal relationships. It just, you can't overstate it, especially as I, reach the half-century milestone in my life. It's even more important for me to consider those kinds of things. But what I would also encourage you to do is travel, and not the kind of touristy travel that you see in splashy magazines, but I would encourage you to do the kind of meaningful travel. A lot of sort of what Brad talked about earlier, what I've had a chance to do when I went to Mexico and studied abroad there. I wasn't in the tourist places. I actually lived with a family and had a chance to see how other people live. And I think it's given me an appreciation for all that we do, and also around the importance of education and around systems, right? The other advice would be to speak up. Just being invited to the table isn't good enough, particularly if that seat is actually wasted if you're silent. And so I would really encourage people to, of course, be respectful of what others are saying, but put that imposter syndrome to the side and recognize that you have a voice, that your opinion is meaningful. And through having those myriad of opinions, you're ultimately going to get to a better solution. But if you're silent, then people are missing out on opportunities to have better solutions. And so just, I'd encourage you to have meaningful travel. Don't just stick to the main places. Invest in cultivating those personal relationships and speak up.
Great reminder. I think we all have that voice that we need to use. So thank you. All right, Brad.
Yeah, that's a good segue, because I was going to say speak up too. I'm thinking back to my, early on, as I was earlier in my career, and I was really challenged by that. I was very intimidated by folks that were older, by folks that seemed to be smarter, which is not hard, but folks that had more experience, and folks that talked a lot. And I was also conscious of what's my reputation. And I don't want to be wrong, and I don't want to sound ignorant, and I don't want to risk that. And I think that's a mistake. And I wish I had learned that earlier, that the contrary is actually true. And as I think about the team I have now, and teams I've been on that have been highly functional, it's when there's equity in opinion, and everyone has the ability to add value, and even questions that may not be the most formed questions, they promote awesome discussion. So I wish I had learned that earlier and practiced that earlier. Secondly, I would say to myself and others that early in career, we often are very competitive, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And so it's all about, how can I push myself forward? How can I move myself forward? And, Kark mentioned this, you're only as good as your team. And to embrace, I wish that I had learned earlier to embrace the team concept, and to really understand that I'm only as good as my team. And so my job is not actually to distinguish myself as the leader. My job is actually to shoulder to shoulder work with my team to accomplish the things we're going to do, and to do that with excellence. And we all win. And the job gets done, and done well. So the final thing I would say, and this is why I have such admiration for Pamela, is I wish I'd pursued more education immediately after NC State. I wish I'd gotten, as an example, my MBA, because many of the roles I've taken on have a finance component to it, and that was like a foreign language to me. So in a sense, I've sort of had to learn get my MBA. I don't have a certificate, but I've had to figure that out. And I think I could have started a little sooner, or come in from a position of strength if I had sought that. I always thought, oh, I'll do that at some point in time. Well, guess what? Time goes away. And so I would encourage folks to seek further education. Nothing's better than that. So those would be my three, Anna. Thank you.
Wonderful. I love all of this. Thank you so much. I'm taking notes pretty viciously. So I appreciate all of you for being here. All right. So we're going to go to the Q&A portion. So if anybody out there has any questions, please feel free to submit them. We had some really great questions come through the registration form. So I'm just going to start there. So we are going to start with a very NC State themed question. So how is thinking and doing in the nonprofit sector different than the private sector? So NC State has an open, innovative campus culture. As a leader, how do you inspire open-mindedness and innovation in your organization? So especially for this first part, I'm definitely going to kick it off to Kark, since he has such a breadth of experience with the private sector. So if you don't mind, Kark.
Sure. And yeah, I'll cover the first part of the question for sure. So, I mean, I think when I think about a nonprofit, and so this kind of been a culture shock coming from a large global company to a large global organization that's operated at a local level and really operates, fairly independently at a local level. So there's a very high desire. There's a high degree of compassion and empathy. It's a kind of a little bit of a culture shock when a lot of your meetings start with devotions and things like that. So it's just there's a really big heart. Having said that, there's often low capability in terms of some of the infrastructure, the tools, the project management skills, and things of that nature. So it's trying to get that balance, and that was part of for me, that my job was created in this organization to try to bring in some of that project management, corporate discipline and structure. So I'm trying to inject that, but trying to figure out how to do it in an appropriate way, and also with the tools and capabilities that you have. And I think maybe Brad mentioned this, or maybe it was in the warm up to the call, but nonprofit work, it's hard. It's real work. It's hard. It's not just, hey, we're going to go do this nice thing. And it's different than volunteering for a few hours and then going back home. I mean, it's definitely real work. And the fact that you don't have some of the infrastructure and tools, just, it makes it challenging. And what it turns into is it takes sometimes a lot longer to get things done that you would think would be easy. And you tend to build some consensus and socialize things a lot more than maybe you did in a command and control kind of corporate environment where somebody would make a decision. But it's also a lot more fulfilling. So, there's the balances of both.
Yes, speed is not a word I always associate. So
Right.
You did definitely touch on that. What about the second part? Brad or Pamela, do you want to talk about the inspiring the open-mindedness and innovation?
I think what's really important is that we lean into this. It's actually an African concept of, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And it really, it tags on to what Kark talked about, especially because now I'm situated in a rural community where resources are limited. And so it's really important that we have great partners, that we have meaningful strategic partnerships in order to accomplish these larger goals. And so my role is to make sure that we're united around a clear goal, and that we are strategically and smartly leveraging our network and working with our partners to get to that goal. But that won't happen unless we dream big. And so I'm a huge fan of dream it and do it. And so we visit places that are doing things that are so just wildly fantastic that it just inspires us. And instead of it having the opposite effect of saying, oh, we'll never be able to do that, we start thinking about, well, what pieces can we take from this other place that's funded with millions and millions of dollars in our rural setting? What can we take back? And through that, we've created some amazing partnerships and some amazing opportunities in agriculture and advanced technology and advanced manufacturing that we wouldn't have been able to accomplish alone. So those are some really critical things. Dream big. Remember that fast is alone, but if you want to go far, you go together.
That's great. Very motivational.
If I'll add a little bit, that's so awesome. I wrote that saying down, Pamela. That's awesome. I think the one thing I would say too is, the perception with nonprofits is that we're vastly different than for-profits, and we're actually very similar. It's just that the product is different and success measures are different, and resources to get those things done are more precious. And so I think the critical thing to not only inspire innovation and inspire new thinking is to have a real clarity on what your mission is, and real clarity on what your mission is not. You don't have time, talent, or resource to waste. And where you see a lot of nonprofits, large and small, stagnating is when they're chasing resources to keep themselves moving, and they get mission drift. And all of a sudden, impact is not clear, and they've lost focus. So I think it's as leaders, it's so critical that you keep your team and your board and stakeholders really focused on what is it exactly that we're trying to do and how are we trying to do it. And the other thing I would say is, especially within the staff team, sometimes nonprofits can work from a place of scarcity instead of a place of abundance. And I love Pamela's idea of dreaming big. And I think that we have to fight that a little bit in our culture, because oftentimes we can think, oh, we're just a little charity. We have to trim down what our dreams and hopes are. And I think the converse is true. And I think that I've always tried to ask the question, when we're talking about new ideas or opportunities for us that fit our mission, the question shouldn't be, why should we do that? The question should be, why not do that? And then chart a path towards that in that regard. So I think it's, sometimes charities get a bad rap for being sort of, grinding and being tough to move forward. But I think in nonprofits, you find some of the most amazing innovation in our culture if we stay focused on what we're trying to accomplish.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I know kind of in the migration question, everyone really talked about their family in some sort of respect. So how do you feel balance of family and business played into your achievements? And do you feel like you have both? I know it's a tough question, but if anybody wants to take that one.
I'll start only because I've got, I think, a slightly different version of what the balance looks like. So I'm actually divorced, but I share custody with my youngest son with my ex-husband, and we've got this great extra family, and it's a pretty different thing that I'm living right now. But the thing that's absolutely critical about it is sort of an acknowledgement of the need for me to have support from other people. So my mom, my dad, my sister, even my two older sons, we are united in making sure that family is a priority, even though it looks a little different than what a traditional family structure would look like. The other thing that I'm learning to do, and this has been a hard thing for me because I am so passionate about the work that we do, is carving out time where I am not thinking about work. And that I am giving my complete attention to family or to friends or to other things. And I'm learning to turn my phone off, to set expectations among my team and my staff, that I do not expect you to work 7 days a week, that it is not healthy to do that, that it is healthier to take regular breaks for yourself, to renew yourself, and just making sure that those things are priorities to me.
Part of what I think about in terms of balance is having a degree of control. And in my old job, because I had people halfway around the world, I would routinely work at 9 and 10 o'clock at night. But that was okay because I usually stopped at 5 p.m. and I always had dinner with my family. So it was, and I had a fair amount of control over when I traveled and meetings I attended and things like that. And so I didn't necessarily mind the fact that I had to work a weekend or an evening if I had control and I could make up for it somewhere else. So I think it's trying to find that. So being intentional about setting boundaries and managing, managing those boundaries. And everybody's view of balance is different, and that ebbs and flows over time as well, depending on what's going on. And as long as you feel like you've got some control, and part of it is you just have to assert it. You just have to draw your boundaries. And back to my earlier comments about setting expectations. If you set an expectation that I'm not available these times, then the people you work with should honor it. And if they don't, maybe you should be somewhere else. Now, if your boundaries are huge and they're always inflexible, then maybe it's you. So you kind of have to figure that out. But setting those boundaries and communicating them and making sure that you're making time for yourself is, the way to do it.
Yeah, I think there's a trap that we often fall in, and I think we think the harder I work, the more I'll get done, or the more I work, the more I'll get done. And we'll also fall into the trap of being competitive, and I need to show my supervisor or my teammates that I'm logging more hours than they are. So it's a trap, and it's not true. And it's not, and the thing that I've tried to assert to myself and to my team is, it's not how many hours you work in the day, it's not how many days you work in the week, it's what impact have you had through your work? And have you done what you're expected to do with excellence? And have you grown the dream? You know, have you inflated the dream balloon of the organization a little bit? Not here's how many hours I worked this week and here's how many emails I sent. It's a real trap, and I think in our culture there's a lot of things that encourage that false idea. So I think it's incredibly important as leaders that we set that example, and don't email people at 9 p.m. and don't email them at 5 a.m. and really set that example, because it's not sustainable. And we're about the marathon. There's times when we need to sprint, but we should be about the long journey. And you can't do that if you're not healthy, if your folks aren't healthy, and if your organization doesn't have a healthy culture.
Yeah, I think setting an example is the perfect way to say that. Okay, so I think this question is just very timely. So I wanted to ask, but what are the main challenges that you face professionally during this COVID-19 era? Hopefully we're getting on the better side of that, but obviously it's still very relevant in our daily lives right now. So does anybody want to touch on that one?
Yeah, I'll talk about that real quick. The biggest thing that has been an impact for me and my team is the things that we raised money for at the hospital. It changed in 3 days, just like the world changed in a week or so. Remember when we all thought it was going to be over in 2 weeks? But we had to pivot really quickly to respond to the needs of the healthcare team at Wake Med. And I think you've heard again and again just how devastating this has been on the healthcare industry from so many angles. And so we had to pivot and instantly come up with new ways, innovative ways to respond to the pandemic in authentic manner that made a difference. And again, resources being precious. So that was challenging, but I'm really proud of the work that we did. The second thing that I think has probably been challenging for all of us, most businesses rely on relationships. And so it's been so hard virtually to connect meaningfully with board members and donors and key stakeholders. And virtual's worked pretty good, but nothing replaces that face-to-face. So we've had to try to be innovative, and we've got a good team, and we've responded with virtual opportunities, but we are anxious to get back to face-to-face. But it's been challenging almost to a mission level for sure.
And we had some of the same experiences where we had to make this huge pivot. With 50% of what we deliver in terms of instruction was hands-on, right? We're preparing people to go into careers in advanced manufacturing and healthcare, and those are things that don't pivot well to online instruction. And so we had to get really creative and innovative about how we still delivered things, but did it in a way that was safe, not only for our faculty and our staff, but for our students, and also for the people that we serve, because one of our hallmarks is that every student is required to do a work-based learning internship. And so we're also working with industry and with clients, and our students are working in clinical settings and healthcare settings. And so we've had to do a lot of pivoting, but we've also been really creative. And so I'm so proud of our partnerships with our community. We also live in a community where a lot of our students don't actually have access to high-speed access to internet. And so what we've been able to do is come up with this long list of businesses that were willing to make their wireless connections available to our students. And so we had parking lot learning, and we had our honor society going out and doing training for the parents and the grandparents who were all of a sudden being placed in this position of being online instructors. And so I could not be, and it also just really made us double down in a way that we never have of how important our mission is to transforming people's lives. And so for us, it's kind of given us new fire for the work that we do, because we see just how how impacted the least of our students have been by COVID.
Yeah, I love seeing the silver linings for sure. So I know we are almost out of time. So one question I did want to just bring up, and I know we kind of briefly talked about it before the call began, but oftentimes when I meet with alumni, they really think of trying to find something that they're really passionate about and about making a difference. And I think especially now post-COVID, or getting past it, hopefully, they really are reassessing their values and trying to, I heard it called the great reassessment instead of the great resignation. And so sort of to that point, as people are considering different options for their careers and feeling like they want to make a difference, I think they often look to nonprofits. So just wanted each of you, in the limited time we have left, just to kind of touch on that piece, like working for a nonprofit, feeling like you're making a difference. Does that resonate with you and feel true? Or is there something else that they would need to know if they are looking to get into the nonprofit field? So Carl, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, happy to start. So I read a book by Bob Buford. It's called Halftime by Bob Buford. And it talks about making career pivots. And he talks about, he built a big cable company and sold it for millions of dollars, but how he went from success to significance is one of the things he talks about. But one of the analogies he uses in there is that drilling oil wells is very expensive. And so what happens is when you're doing oil exploration, you go out and you do seismic testing to test to see, is this environment likely to produce oil? And so he used that as an example of doing that in your career. And so his thing for seismic testing is, go try something, but get involved with it. And then you can figure out if you want to make a pivot. And so for me, some of the seismic testing I did related to move into habitat is I went on a Habitat El Salvador trip where a Charlotte group went down to El Salvador 4 years ago and built a house. I'd done Appalachian Service Project in Western Virginia. I'd done some mission trips with my church. So I had spent some time kind of getting immersed in some nonprofits and also nonprofits that were doing housing related work. And so I knew people, I knew the CEO at this habitat. So it was a big change for me, but it wasn't just entirely a leap of faith. So doing that seismic testing is a really good way to figure out, where, and you may decide it's not the place, and that's fine because you haven't risked everything to make the move.
That's so helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll chime in real quick. I think that, oftentimes when folks ask me, I'd love to be engaged in a nonprofit because I want to have an impact and I want to make a difference, and I'm not fulfilled in my current role. I think that you need to be honest with yourself about what the issue is and what the problem or the challenge is. Because I think my experience is oftentimes if you're not fulfilled, it's not because of where you are, it's because internally there's something going on that you need to address. And whether that's health, whether that's assessing what my values are, being very intentional about choices, but just picking up and ending a career and trying to start a new career, it sounds noble and sounds opportunistic, but it doesn't end well sometimes. So just being honest. I love the oil well analogy. I think that's absolutely spot on.
And I would say I like the idea as well, but find ways to add value and have meaning where you're planted, right? So part of my responsibility as my personal mission is to transform and uplift communities in which I'm rooted, right? So this is where I'm rooted. So I have figured out ways to get involved here. Many companies have community service hours. There are ways that you can volunteer. Think about the things you love about your work and look for opportunities to leverage the things you love where you're at. I would strongly discourage people from just quitting and saying, okay, I'm going to join a nonprofit. We would strongly urge you to do it in a more measured way.
Thank you. I think that is a fabulous point. So, all right, well, we do want to be respectful of everybody's time, and we are right at the hour mark. So thank you so much to each of our wonderful speakers. I know, like I said, I took a lot of notes, and I thought each of you had some really insightful things and stories and advice. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for watching. We hope you have a great rest of the day. Take care.
Thank you.
Go Pack.